Hello everyone, and welcome to I Couldn't Help But Wonder, or simply ICHBW episode 3. So today we consider quite a debating and I would say a difficult topic, because there is a very interesting trend that happens in many societies nowadays. So, why I decided to make this video? The inspiration for this video was just one reel where, long story short, a girl was mentioning the necessity to create some kind of a regulation or law that would facilitate the distinction of situations where and when we need to use the formal you and where and when we need to use the informal you. If you're a bit confused, in many languages, we have this distinction. We have two separate personal pronouns for formal you and informal you. You can think of it in the following way. Informal you is the pronoun that you would use mainly with your close friends or your family. And the formal you, on the contrary, is the one that you would use with strangers or with your manager, boss, so on and so forth. For instance, in Romance languages, in French, we have the tu for informal and vous for formal. Same we have in Italian, Spanish, and Portuguese, and etc. Germanic languages, take for instance German, we have the du and the sie, informal and formal. In Slavic languages, for example Russian, ty и вы, informal you, formal. Same in Greek, same in Armenian, Georgian, Tatar, Bashkir, and etc. I would say in all languages except for English or the ones that are perhaps related to English. But you might say, well, this is the peculiarity of different aspects of a human life. And it could be, actually, because the choice could depend on different categories or different aspects. For instance, you can consider sociology. It can depend on the age. So if a person is older than you, you would use the formal you. If it is the stranger or the ranking social status of this person higher than yours, you would say the formal you. It might also depend on the size of a country. Think of it in the following way. So if the country is small, like some kind of a village data sign, in a village, people usually know each other, so they are not strangers. And same thing with a small country. Could be acceptable. Or perhaps people just friendly to each other and patriotic, or they feel as if they were some kind of a family. Interesting. It might also depend on the location of a country. Say, the southern the country is, or the southern the part is, the friendlier the people are. Italian, Spanish. Mainly, when you use these languages, quite often, they, at the very beginning, present you the form of informal you in place of formal. For instance, you would say scusi in place of scusa, which is interesting in Italian. It might also depend on the weather. The warmer the country is, the friendlier the people are, and etc. But does it mean that informality equals being friendly? Don't know. It's an open question for us to discuss, and perhaps throughout this video we'll find the answer to this very question. And as for me personally, I quite often interact with different cultures, and I also have this problem. What do I need to use? Therefore, it is another reason, the personal reason for me to make this video. So, but we said about other languages, right? But what about English then? Don't we have it? Have we ever had it? We actually did have it before, and nowadays it's considered to be a bit more, would say, archaic or outdated. Let's travel back to medieval English and Shakespearean texts. In Shakespearean texts, we quite often had this distinction of you and thou, thou, though. And it was present, so though it is your informal pronoun. But perhaps throughout the time, English-speaking people, they decided to facilitate the speech, also to facilitate the understanding where we need to use it, and they decided to erase the though and replace it with a universal and quite multifunctional, would say, and quite versatile you. So this way you don't need to think about the situation and what is acceptable or not, which is a good decision in some ways. Now we did have it. And throughout this video, of course, for the sake of a shorter video, so we'll try to economize at least a couple of seconds, we would say for informal you, though, and for formal you, you. So this distinction would be present, and keep this in your mind. Right, and as for the plan for this video, we will try to go through the main aspects of a human life: family, educational system, work, and daily life. Daily life would be just some kind of an example. We will try to apply our theory and to consider this. I would also love to focus on internet communication, but it is a huge topic. The internet communication, it is too vague and you cannot theorize it, unfortunately. But on the internet, yeah, we will perhaps, if we have some time, we would also focus on it a bit. Right. So in the inspiration for this video, for the title of this video rather, was Sam Quellin, because after watching that reel, I immediately started to Google and I wanted to find an article that is kind of related to this topic. And I found this wonderful piece. So if you're interested, you can find it in the commentary section below, or rather in the description section, and read the whole article, just 7 minutes. So thank you, Sam Quellin, and thank you for a wonderful idea and perhaps a new branch of linguistics: chillaxed syntax. Chill and relaxed, chillaxed syntax. So, and we dive into our first chapter. I have a plan in here, so these are the timestamps that you can also follow. Right. So, and we go to families. So when we think about a family, immediately I wanted to Google again and to find a bit of information on what parents or what people say. So, and we will try to focus on 3 commentaries. So I found on Quora, original question goes, is it normal for children to call their parents by their first names instead of mom and dad? We will consider 3 commentaries and then we will try to theorize it. So the first commentary goes the following way. Of course, it is considered unusual and often said. It is customary for children to refer to their parents with terms of endearment, mom, dad, mommy, daddy, and etc. We use first names to refer to our colleagues, friends, neighbors, casual acquaintances, anyone other than our loved ones. And when a child refers to their parents by their first names, it often means they do not have close relationship with their parents. They consider them to be mere acquaintances. Which is an interesting point. We can stop in here. I would disagree with it. I will tell you why a bit later, but here, after reading this commentary, there is another trend that happens in families especially. Quite often, parents say to their children, you know, I'm your friend. And if we try to use the idea from this commentary, we use first names to refer to colleagues, friends, and etc. Then if a parent is your friend, logically, you need to use then the first name. But it is a topic as well to consider. So if you have any ideas, share, please. What is acceptable? Should we have this division? Family is family, friends are friends. I don't know. Now we'll go to the second commentary. And I agree with this one a bit more than with the first one. I don't think it is usual, but does happen from time to time. My children were told when we were in a public place that it was fine to call us by our names if they needed to get our attention. And here is a little situation. Imagine a little kid screaming "Mommy, Mommy" in Disneyland. Every woman in the place was named Mommy. Reasonable. But if the kid was yelling "Alice, Alice," you can bet that I would be the only one responding. They only used my given name way they needed to. Children should be taught their parents' names. So if they are ever lost, they can tell the helpful employee or officer, "My mom's name is Mary Cooper, not my mom's name is Mommy." Interesting point, and I agree with it. We need to know and we need to teach our children our names. So this way they use our names in a situation where they truly need to. Right, and we go to the last commentary. It's a bit of a long run, but we'll focus only on the essentials. One reason why a child would call their parents by their first names rather than calling them mommy or daddy is because the parents told their children to do so. You can call us mom and dad occasionally, but not all the time. When you start to think about it, mommy and daddy are ubiquitous words that describe a function, not a person. It indicates that you are a parent. But when somebody calls you by such a ubiquitous term, it's the same thing as saying, "Hey, you." Interesting. So, and after this, we start to philosophize. Throughout the whole video, I've created a couple of diagrams that we would also refer to, so this way it's a bit easier to visualize my thoughts. In this commentary, in the third one, we had our main distinction, and I decided to call it the me self. So the way me or a person is seen in a society. And we can have two main distinctions: our persona, which is our first name, and our role, mommy or daddy as it was. Of course, in my point of view, based on these, well, especially the second and the third commentaries, in a family, we can use both persona and role when necessary. We saw an example with a kid being lost. And we can even think about parents. Parents, they use actually three variations towards their children. They use the role, son, daughter. They use the persona, the first name, Andrew, Tatiana, Kate, James, etc. And additionally, they use the terms of endearment. Terms of endearment, it's a bit confusing one, because before, I think it was in the first one, mommy and daddy, the terms of endearment. But for children, it is mainly terms such as, oh, cupcake, sunshine, sunflowers, so on and so forth. Is it role or persona? It is an additional question to ponder on. If you have any thoughts, let's develop, let's discuss. Because I would say it's more of a persona. Yeah, and I don't have any arguments. Well, anyways. So, yeah, as I said, parents, they also use it, especially when they want to scold a child. Very often they would use the first name, like, "Oh, you, Andrew, take off your glasses," for instance. And now, as we discussed the roles and personas and to define that we can use both in a family, what about personal pronouns, thou or you? Which one is better? And here we can travel back in time, in history, and focus on the upper class, where we have seen instances of both children and parents referring to each other using the you in place of thou. And in middle class and lower class, in my point of view, we don't really have a lot of instances of such, and perhaps it was more of a thou. Is it connected to social class? Is it connected to intelligence, being clever, so on and so forth? Don't know. In my point of view, it's not really connected to this one, but more to the way we envision these pronouns. Remember, previously we mentioned informality equals being friendly. And in my point of view, informality equals being friendly. It is reasonable for the middle class and lower class. Perhaps. Do not throw tomatoes at me, please. And no potatoes. Potatoes, of course. But perhaps, yeah, it's just the way we envision things. We can think of individual understanding of the world. Different classes understand the world in different ways. They see the world through the different prism or from the different angle. But it is a completely different topic. Maybe one day we'll discuss it too. But yeah, so perhaps it would be different in different families of different class. But still, what is better if we do not classify people according to the social groups or social classes? In my point of view, both can be acceptable. Because I would say that a family, we already see that it is rather versatile with roles and personas being implemented both depending on the situation. And I would say same with pronouns. It should be versatile. If you want, you can use thou. If you want, you can use you. It really depends on you or on thou. Anyways, so yeah, family, it's a beautiful place and it's a very specific and versatile. So now let's also consider a very interesting fact of related to families. So we have another distinction that we would take a look at a bit later. So our family, because I really want to share with you my own experience of observing families in Russia and in France. And when we think of a family, we have two types of families actually. We have a nuclear one or the immediate one, so our parents, siblings mainly, wife, husband, children. And we have the distant one or the extended one. Here we can think of our aunts, cousins, uncles, grandparents, so on and so forth. And based on my personal experience, I've noticed a very interesting feature. When I talk about my nuclear family, it is mainly thou. And when I talk about my extended family, I use both, thou and you. For instance, with my aunts and uncles, I would use only you. With my grandma, I would use thou. Here's the question, is grandma then the part of your nuclear family? And with my cousin, I would use thou too. But here perhaps the difference in age, meaning that we have only 2 years age difference, plays an essential role. But if we compare with French families, in French families for both nuclear and extended families, mainly middle class, you would use thou, which is interesting. All right, so family, we are through. So, and the conclusion that we can wrap up. So we've discussed 3 commentaries and we've tried to develop our own theory based on these commentaries. That a society or the me-self, the way we envision ourselves or the way we have to present ourselves, can be divided into persona and a role, where persona is your first name and the role is, so to say, your role in a society. Mommy, daddy, son, daughter. We have also defined that there are some differences in different cultures, which is a cultural aspect to consider. And I would be very interested in your thoughts and the way your families functions in your country. Of course, we mentioned the very basic and evident aspects that also could play an essential role. The age difference, the ranking difference, and the distance difference, nuclear extended families, and potentially social groups or social classes, upper class, middle class, lower class, and that different people in different classes envision informality in a different way. For middle class and lower class, it could be the representation of friendliness, while for upper class, don't know. I'm not the part of upper class, so I cannot even imagine. Right. So we go to educational system. Ooh, here it would be very, very difficult. So educational system. We have three main stages, or perhaps two: kindergarten, schools, and universities. So what do we need to do in these places? Let's start with kindergartens, but before discussing kindergartens, we would expand a bit our theory. So here we need to define another feature of society, and we call it the itself, or itself, so it is the way we can characterize the society. We define two main types: inner society and the outer society. Inner, inside your house. Outer, outside your house. That's simple, right? So, and the inner society, yeah, this is the part of your family. We would expand it a bit later as well. And the outer, well, this is not the part of your family. That's simple. When we talk about kindergartens, it is actually a first stage of us interacting with the outer society. Now, let's consider our three main aspects: roles, personas, and the though you choice. Starting with roles and personas, let's try to question: do we have roles in a kindergarten? We do, right? So we have the roles of a child and a teacher. Even though I would say that a child does actually have any role in a kindergarten. Therefore, I would say that there is no necessity to use any roles in a kindergarten, meaning that there is no necessity to call a child and a teacher or a tutor a teacher or a tutor. Let's try to expand it. Now you will perhaps understand my way of envisioning things. So, persona, right? As it is the first interaction with the outer world, I believe that it would be perhaps more necessary and more essential for children to get used to express or present themselves using their persona, using their names. Therefore, in my point of view, the best thing to do in kindergartens is to use only persona, which is the first name, towards both children and educators. That's why, educational system is a very tricky place. Remember, we mentioned the roles, right? And here we can actually have another distinction of roles in kindergarten and actually in a society. We can have two types of roles that I personally defined: stable and unstable. So, what are the stable roles that we can have in a society? Even though it is a choice to be a parent, I think that being a parent, it is a stable role in a society. Because once you've chosen to be a parent, well, you stay a parent till the end of your days. Unstable, however, it is your profession. So you gain this role throughout your life. What about being a child? It is unstable too. Number, it is your age. You can be a teenager, it is your role. You can be an adult, it is your role. So that's why I decided to place it to the role section, but not to the persona one. Because it is unstable and it changes. So And yeah, the roles, it's a very interesting thing, and we actually start to get acquainted with social ranking in the kindergarten. But again, as it is the first interaction with the outer world, I believe that it would be with the outer society, it would be so much better to be able to introduce your persona in place of using these roles classification. Oh yeah, thou and you. So this is where we start to actually create some kind of a scheme, logical one, I hope. So kindergarten, it is the outer society, right? And the inner society, as we mentioned before, it is your family, where you can be versatile. But in the outer, you need to follow the rules and the regulations of the outer society. And therefore, in my point of view, if you prefer to use personal pronouns, you go with you. This way, you are safe. First of all, you don't have the confusion. And secondly, well, and these people are not part of your inner society. So, what's the point? Anyways, so this distinction is very important in my point of view. So, and what then are the conclusions we've defined after kindergarten? Well, in kindergarten, we've defined that society can have its own characteristics, and we've called them the it self. And society can get divided into inner society, which is our family, where we are versatile, and the outer society, which is outer, which is the society out of our house. And therefore, we are not as versatile in the outer than we are in the inner. And as it is the outer, we need to focus on the outer rules. However, like kindergarten, it is the first interaction with the outer world, and I believe that it would be quite convenient for both educators and children to use the persona in place of using the role. And as for the pronouns, only you, because it is the outer society. Use the rules of the outer society. Even though I might sound a bit too conservative, but this is what I see. Now we go to schools. So in schools, we start to notice another distinction of persona. Remember, we said that persona, it is your first name. But not only, because you actually have additional name, right? Which is your family name or your surname. Therefore, your persona can have persona 1, your first name, and persona 2, your last name. Schools, it is the place where we start to kinda get a role in society. And our role, it is being a student, but additionally, our role is to present not only us using our first names, but to be the representation of our family in some ways, perhaps. Even though we start to notice the wonderful language evolution where we kinda losing our surnames and we prefer to use first names. Is it good? Is it bad? I don't know. It's an open question for all of us to discuss. What are your thoughts? But in my point of view, it's just the language evolution that we cannot ignore. Right. So any of these could be good, but I believe using surname is a bit archaic, a bit outdated nowadays. So we would use our persona 1, our first names. What about roles? Do we need to use our roles? Totally. So when you refer to a teacher, use the role of a teacher. and use the persona 1 or persona 2. And vice versa. When you refer to a student, use the role of a student, or in place of using the role, rather use the persona 1 or persona 2. Because it would be weird to say something like, oh, James, student 1. Weird. But interesting point. And, in schools, I also wanted to think about another distinction of our society, or the itself. Remember, in the part of kindergarten, we were talking about the inner and the outer societies. And here we start to see another distinction of inner society with inner 1 and inner 2, where inner 1, it is your family, so if you will, your natural inner society, and your inner 2, it is your gained or developed inner society, your friends, your boyfriends, girlfriends, partners, so on and so forth, and outer, well, is outer, right? But quite interestingly, if we develop this one, so we start to think that, okay, so then a person from the outer society can become the part of the inner society, right? So a no one or unknown person can become your friend. And then, of course, it can become your family if you get married to this person. And vice versa. The person can get from the inner 1 to the outer. For instance, it can be if you're a teacher. Hello, I'm a teacher. And your relative from the inner 1, from your family, becomes your student. Then automatically, this person, well, at least during your lessons, moves from the inner 1 into the outer. And this is interesting. Then, based on this fluid theory, does it mean that a person can be simultaneously in both cases, being in inner 1 and outer simultaneously? In my point of view, like kinda yes and no, but it really depends on the situation. So you see, we had an example with a relative being your student. So yes, this person is the part of inner 1, but for 30 minutes, he, so to say, or she disappears and gets into the outer. So you see, based on the situation, it can change. But what about a family getting from inner 1 to inner 2? Does it mean then that your parents, in some situations, can be the part of inner 2 for a short time? Yeah, they can. And this is, I think, the answer to the question that we had. Can parents and children be friends? I think they can. All right. So, yeah. And this is the point that we've mentioned. So that in schools, we start to, so to say, expand and to have this kind of a fluid or a river, if you will, between inner to outer and vice versa in both directions. Now, additional point that we have not considered yet in here is the use of though or you. We have already defined that at school it is the outer world, therefore use the rules of the outer society. You only. Though is the part of your inner society. Simple as it. Now, we go to universities. What do we have with universities? First of all, roles or personas. What kind of persona do we need to use? As it was defined throughout the school section, persona 2 gets a bit outdated. Persona 1 is a good choice. So, and roles, do we need to use the roles? Yeah, because in universities we do have roles. We do have doctors, professors, PhDs, so on and so forth. So these are our roles, and we can clearly envision them in universities. Though or you, what to use? Well, it is the outer world, so use you, never though. But again, if you start getting people from the outer to the inner, well, you do the switch. As simple as this. All right. And then we go to the work. This is where I get angry. Because my personal experience is that, because I work with different people from different countries, and we do have the distinction between you and thou, and I hate people, and I hate this trend. I hope it is a fab, rather not a trend, that we try to create a friendly atmosphere, and we try to use the thou in place of you. I hate it. I hate it because your work is your outer world. So use the rules of the outer world. What about roles and personas? Well, again, as we mentioned, persona 2 is old-fashioned, so you can use your persona 1, but also use your roles, because here we can develop another idea. Manipulation. Because once I was planifying this video, I started to think about manipulation. What do I mean? Because I lived in Russia for quite a long time, and I noticed that when we use thou with strangers, we also add a bit of an angry voice or something. And perhaps it's just my personal experience, but in my point of view, the person, or rather, if you use thou, it's easier to manipulate a person. I wanted, to propose the same idea about using persona 1 and persona 2, but I think, it will not work with persona 1 and persona 2. But what do I mean? Because manipulation, I would love to make another video related to manipulation one day in the future. But think of it in the following way. So, same thing, it is actually manipulation, works when you have a quarrel, right? And you are screaming, or you start to scream at another person. And in my point of view, it is another example of manipulation, that you start to scream and you kind of try to force this person, or rather try to question this person whether, oh, I'm screaming at you, and are you able to scream at me, or will you be able, or will you even let yourself to scream at me? And then this person starts to scream, or not, don't know. So it is a manipulation. And in my point of view, the same when we talk about the thou and you, the use of thou, it's when you try to get kind of closer to a person, so you try to get into the inner world of this person, and you kind of indirectly manipulating this person, trying to trigger something. So you see, it's also a topic to develop, but it is so difficult to develop. So, but this is what I think. So in my point of view, at work, as it is the parts of outer world, outer society, we focus only outer society. So now we go to the conclusions and this huge table. So what we have discussed today, we have discussed the main aspects of a human life, and we have created this wonderful table, or rather this wonderful diagram, just based on the things that we have discussed. So when we think about the society, we have the me-self and the it-self. Me-self is the way you envision or you represent yourself in a society. You have two types. You have a role that can be stable or unstable. So stable role is the role that you, so to say, get naturally in some ways, like you become a mother, a sister, a brother. So you see, mainly these roles are related to kinship. And you have unstable roles, so the roles that you gain throughout your life. You also have two types of persona, persona 1 being your first name and persona 2 being your second name or your family name. But in my point of view, persona 2 is getting a bit outdated, and persona 1 is preferable. And depending on a social situation or social context, you can use either persona or either role, or you can use actually either persona or role. So you can be versatile. When we talk about itself, or the way we can characterize the society, we have the inner society, which is mainly our friends and family. And as you see, we have the division of inner 1 and inner 2. Inner 1 being our family, that can be also divided into nuclear and extended. And inner 2, it is our close friends that we can be friends with or be partners with. And the outer society, so the family out of our house, or the family that is not related to our family. And a person can actually move from inner 1 to inner 2, or from outer 1, from the outer to the inner 2 to the inner 1, and vice versa, depending on the situation, and mainly for a short time. So it means that a person cannot be so to say, for a long time in one of these area if this person is transitioning somewhere or is moving towards something. So yeah, this is the theory that we have developed in the video that we have just made because of one reel that I found on Monday. So it is a very long video, but I really hope that it was interesting for all of you. And now let's discuss it together because we have a lot of things to discuss. And otherwise, yeah, see you one day in the future.